Hello, good afternoon, good morning, everyone, depending where you're joining from today. We'll wait just another few seconds to allow everyone to get joined and get their audio tested to make sure that they're hearing and seeing everything before we begin. Okay, well, I know we have a lot to cover today, so I think we'll probably go ahead and get started. Just wanted to say welcome everyone to today's webinar, Like, Love, Follow, Understanding Teen Dating Violence in the Digital World. My name is Shane Hampshire with RTI, and I'll be your Zoom technician and support producer for today. If you need any assistance technical-wise, please let me know in the chat. I'll be happy to help troubleshoot with any needs you may have. Also, we do have the Q&A open today. We do have a lot to get through, as I mentioned, so we do ask that if you could hold your questions to the Q&A. And when we get to the Q&A, we also encourage you to raise your hand and be able to unmute your audio and video to ask your questions and engage with our presenters today. We do have the closed captioning enabled. You can manage that by clicking on the CC button on your Zoom toolbar and using show or hide subtitles. So once again, if you need anything throughout today's webinar, please let me know in the chat. Otherwise, I'm happy to hand things over to Denise Dickinson from RTI to get us going with introductions.
Hi, everyone. I'm Denise Dickinson. I lead the development of webinars, share and learn sessions, and print materials for SRAE training and technical assistance. Welcome to today's webinar, Like, Love, Follow, Understanding Teen Dating Violence in the Digital World. Our presenters today are Sydney Briggs and Abigail Wula from Child Trends, and I'm going to let them tell you a little bit about themselves before we get going. I'll pass it on to them.
Hi, everyone. My name is Sydney Briggs, and I'm a research scientist at Child Trends, which is a nonprofit research center focused on issues relating to children and families. And we're really happy to be here today with our colleagues from RTI. I am in our parenting and family dynamics program area, and a lot of my portfolio covers intimate partner violence and also teen pregnancy prevention. And I'm joined by my colleague, Abigail, as well.
Thank you, Sydney. So yes, I'm Abigail, analyst here at Child Trends, and my background is more of racial equity and teen pregnancy, mixed with a little bit of adolescent health overall. So yes, and I'm excited to be part of this presentation today.
Great. So we are really grateful to have the opportunity to talk with you all today about this really important topic. We'll be covering basic information about what constitutes teen dating violence and how many people it affects. We'll focus in on how this plays out in the digital world for today's young people. And we'll go over some ways that SRAE programs can help prevent or address domestic dating violence. And lastly, we'll leave you all with some resources. One of the things we'll cover today is the prevalence of teen dating violence and also adult intimate partner violence. So we know that these are very common experiences that touch a lot of lives and can really be very traumatizing. So if at any point any of the content today starts to become triggering or uncomfortable for you, I hope that you will give yourself permission to take some space, do whatever it is you need to reground yourself a bit in the present and feel more of a sense of safety. Also, we know that this is a topic that you may already have professional or personal experience with. So we're looking forward to hearing some of your perspectives towards the end of the session, especially your strategies for integrating dating violence prevention or healthy relationship promotion in your programs. All right, so we are going to start off with a short true or false activity. This is adapted from a tool created by the National Center on Domestic and Sexual Violence, and it is going to pop up as a poll within your Zoom window. And you're gonna see some prompts and answer true, false, or unsure for each of them. So here is gonna come the first one, which is dating violence is rare among high school students and college students. True or false? All right, and we are seeing an overwhelming number of false responses on this poll, and that's absolutely correct. The lifetime prevalence of IPV is estimated to be about 3 in 10 for women and 1 in 10 for men. And there's been a fairly recent meta-analysis showing that in high school already, the prevalence is estimated to be about 1 in 5 or 20% for physical teen dating violence. So this is definitely not a rare occurrence that we're talking about. All right, so the second prompt is when a young person leaves an abusive relationship, the abuse usually ends. All right, so this is false, and the vast majority of you were right on the money there. Unfortunately, for both young people and for adults, leaving a relationship can be a particularly dangerous time and actually a time when abuse escalates. And this is why there's a lot of emphasis on safety planning around this time among domestic violence advocates. Okay. The next one is drug and or alcohol use is often a factor in dating violence incidents. All right, responses are strongly leaning towards true here, and that is correct, but it's a little bit of like a yes and. So drug and alcohol use are both risk factors for dating violence perpetration and victimization, and they're more common among people in relationships where abuse occurs, but they're typically not thought of as causes of dating violence. All right. Next one here is the best way to get a friend to leave an abusive relationship is to cut ties with them. All right. And again, we're seeing an overwhelming number of false responses for this one. And that's true. And I think that that is, you know, relatively straightforward to say when we see sort of a cut and dry statement like this, but a really important thing to think about thoroughly, right? Because it can be so hard to watch someone that we care about stay in a relationship that seems bad for them and that we really want them to leave. But an important thing to understand is that isolating a partner from friends and families is a tactic of abuse and a way for someone using violence to gain more power over the person that they're victimizing. So while we may need to set boundaries, and the young people we're working with may need to set boundaries to protect our own well-being, right? Things like ultimatums and cutting ties with someone we're concerned about definitely isn't a way to support them, and may even have the opposite effect, since someone who is being abused in a relationship needs help and support from outside their relationship. And is probably less likely to leave their relationship without support from family and friends. All right, and the last one that we're going to do here is if violence occurs once in a teen dating relationship, it is likely to happen again. All right, we've got, I think, 96% true on that one, and this is correct. One of the really important things to understand, right? These key fundamental things to understand about dating violence is that it's a pattern of behavior and it tends to escalate over time. This means that an act of violence occurring once is a strong predictor for it happening again in the future. Okay, well, that is the end of our kind of kickoff activity. You all clearly have like a good amount of familiarity with this topic, so we're looking forward to diving into it more with all of you. And I'm going to pass things over to Abigail.
Thank you, Sydney. So as we dive in to get a better understanding of teen dating violence, of course, we need to take a little bit of time to talk about the foundation foundational knowledge, concepts, and statistics. So let's do that. Okay, so intimate partner violence, or IPV, is a pattern of behaviors used by a current or former partner to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. A term that you may be more familiar with would be domestic violence, or DV. But the intimate partner violence behaviors include physical, sexual, economic, emotional, stalking, or emotional psychological aggression, including coercive acts. Additionally, this can include cultural, spiritual, and reproductive aggression. And though this is not an exhaustive list, the common thread between the behaviors displayed in intimate partner violence are that they're power seeking and done with the intention of controlling. Intimate partner violence can occur in intimate partnerships among people of any age. And when we focus specifically on teens or adolescents, we refer to this as teen dating violence, or TDV. Teen dating violence is also a pattern of physical, sexual, psychological, and other forms of abuse aimed at maintaining power or control over one's intimate partner. In this case, however, we're focusing on how it manifests among younger people, which is teens ages 13 through 19. And then just so you know, other terms that you might see used in place of TDV or teen dating violence would be adolescent dating violence, or ADV, and adolescent relationship abuse, which is ARA. And teen dating violence can take place in person, right? Such as homes, schools, or wherever young people may hang out, but it can also take place online through technology. This is because today's youth are highly plugged in and spend much of their time online. So the internet is very integrated into their daily life. And unfortunately, that means that teen dating violence can take place there too. Teen dating violence is a public health issue. It affects millions of teens here in the US, and it puts them at risk of experiencing intimate partner violence in the future, as well as sexual violence and many other negative health outcomes throughout their lifetime. So as mentioned previously, intimate partner violence, and therefore teen dating violence, refers to a pattern of behaviors one partner uses to maintain power and control over another partner in an intimate relationship. Displayed here on this screen is the Teen Power and Control Wheel, which is a tool that can be used to visualize how teens can use multiple tactics either simultaneously or interchangeably when forming a pattern of harmful behaviors aimed at controlling their intimate partner. And this is possible because teen dating violence does not happen in a vacuum. So you can look at this ongoing behavior as if it's a cycle, or in this example, a bike wheel that can keep turning unless it's stopped. And the components of the wheel that we know of are the center, the spokes, and the rim. Granted, in real life, the bike wheel I'm sure it does have more parts, but we're just going to keep it simple. So when you examine this wheel in regard to teen dating violence, you see that in the center of the wheel is its intention for spinning, which is power and control. And then spreading out from a center, you see that it is attached to the spokes, which represent the tactics that teens may use to exert power and control over their partner. And then last, on the very outside of the wheel is the rim, which is physical and sexual violence. And so this is because the tactics within the wheel give way to one partner having control over the other due to the looming threat of physical or sexual violence. And then as the wheel turns, moving further and further on its journey of power and control seeking, the frequency, the severity, and the impact of these violent behaviors tend to escalate over time. So to help illustrate how these tactics can lean into one partner having power and control over the other, I'm going to give you a scenario using a few tactics from within the wheel. So let's say we have two teens, Kai and Atlas, who are in a relationship where one partner expects the other, Atlas, to answer all their phone calls and all their text messages immediately. Additionally, let's say Kai wants Atlas to constantly share their location and their passwords. Atlas expresses to Kai that this feels very controlling. Kai then minimizes Atlas's concern, explaining that the focus is not because of control, but out of love and safety. So Atlas lets it go and abides by Kai's demands. But over time, Kai continues to require more things of Atlas, and while they're requiring more things, they're denying that the purpose is that they want control. So when Atlas does not want to abide by Kai's quote unquote request, Kai threatens to leave the relationship or damages property or hurts himself. One time it went as far that Kai even broke Atlas's phone for changing their password and then blamed Atlas for making them do it. So now Atlas feels trapped in the relationship where they are constantly gaslit and they live in fear of angering their partner, Kai, to the point of being harmed, whether it be physically, whether it be sexually. So this is just like a short scenario, but in real life, there's so many other tactics that could be used, including those not captured on this wheel, that could happen in real life that play into the cycle of power and control. Okay, so while discussing, to discuss teen dating violence in the US, we also have to first ask, how prevalent is it? Well, according to the 2019 Youth Risk Behavior Survey, at least 1 in 12 students that reported dating in the past year experienced physical dating violence, and at least 1 in 12 experienced sexual dating violence. However, estimates for the prevalence rate could vary considerably based on the ages of the respondents surveyed. For example, if you ask older or younger teens, or you use different age groupings, as well as the measurement tools used. And as another example, data compiled from multiple studies has shown that overall teen dating violence rates, prevalence can be as high as 20%, which is 1 in 5 for physical teen dating violence, or about 9%/1 in 10 for sexual teen dating violence among youth ages 13 to 18. So ultimately, teen dating violence is an unfortunate reality for many teens. And then some teens actually experience higher rates of teen dating violence than others, which is what we're going to talk about now. So presented on this graph here, you can see that 7 and 9% of the male and female students that reported dating in the past year had experienced physical dating violence. This is roughly 1 in 14 male and 1 in 10 female students. And as you can see, female students experienced physical dating violence at a significantly higher rate than male students. This situation is even more alarming when you consider the prevalence rate for sexual dating violence. As the graph shows, 3.8% of male students reported experiencing sexual dating violence. But on the other hand, it was a staggering 12.6% of female students that reported experiencing the same thing. For perspective, this is 1 in 26 male students compared to 1 in, I'm mixing my numbers. It's 1 in 8 female students compared to 1 in 26 male students. So as you can see, female students do experience higher rates of physical and sexual teen dating violence due to a variety of complex factors. And these reasons could include gender-based power imbalances, societal norms, or stereotypes about gender roles. But this disparity in teen dating violence prevalence between male and female students also highlights the need for us to critically examine the impacts of gender roles and stereotypes. The prevalence rates when we look at students who are sexual minorities are even more alarming, with disproportionately higher rates of sexual minorities experiencing both physical and sexual teen dating violence. So when we look at the data, we can see that 7.2% of heterosexual students experienced physical dating violence, while the numbers were 13.1% for lesbian, gay, or bisexual students, and 16.9% for students that were not sure of their sexual identity. Students not sure of their sexual identity experience the highest rates of physical teen dating violence at about 2 times the rate of heterosexual students who experience the lowest rates of physical teen dating violence. Heterosexual students also experience lower rates of sexual teen dating violence too than sexual minorities, with a prevalence rate of 6.7%, whereas lesbian, gay, or bisexual students experience over 16%, followed by students that were not sure of their sexual identity at 15%. So once again, we see that lesbian, gay, or bisexual students experienced about 2 times the rate of heterosexual students. And these statistics demonstrate that there is a need for greater awareness and support for students who do identify as sexual minorities, because factors like discrimination, peer victimization, childhood maltreatment can all play a major role in how sexual minority teens experience elevated vulnerability to teen dating violence. So incorporating important topics like sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression into programming are critical for the safety of sexual minority youth. Yes. In addition to identities like gender and sexual orientation, there are also characteristics that shape young people's likelihood to use or experience violence in their relationships. Firstly, experiencing or witnessing violence within the family, including intimate partner violence between parents, can increase the risk of using and experiencing teen dating violence. That is why here on the screen, you'll see that it's listed on both sides of the tables. Likewise, prior teen dating violence experience is a risk factor for future experiences, whereas prior teen dating violence experience or use is a risk factor for future teen dating violence use. Another strong risk factor for experiencing teen dating violence is having normative beliefs about gender inequality and peer acceptance of teen dating violence. Simply put, if living in an environment where gender inequality and violence is normalized, especially intimate partner violence, it contributes to a teen's risk of experiencing violence. Then having sex before age 16 is often identified as a risk factor for teen dating violence, but it's important to note that though teens having sex before age 16 does not directly cause teens to experience teen dating violence, but rather teens who have sex before age 16 tend to share risk factors with teens that experience teen dating violence. Additional strong risk factors for using violence include sexual risk-taking, approval of violence, depression, substance use, delinquency, minor crimes. And like early sex, however, these risk factors are mainly correlational. It's not guaranteed to be a direct causation. And that's because the teens who are involved with these activities may also share risk factors with teens who also use teen dating violence. But these activities are not absolute determinants that the teens will use teen dating violence. Okay, so experiencing teen dating violence is associated with many negative outcomes for teen health and well-being. 3 categories that can be affected in the teen's life are their physical and mental health, their social life or relationships, and then their education and their career. To name a few examples from this slide, teens may turn to substance use or develop an eating disorder for coping with their experiences, or end up socially isolated from their family or peers. This could also play a role in continued teen dating violence or experiencing intimate partner violence in their adulthood. Additionally, teen dating violence can lead to poor school performance or job loss if the teen is working. And this could be for a variety of reasons, such as attempting to avoid their partners or peers at school, if experiencing teen dating violence is affecting their mental health so much that it also affects their school performance. And overall, experiencing teen dating violence can harm a teen in so many different ways. However, there are protective factors that can reduce the risk of experiencing or using teen dating violence. These include social support, parental monitoring, empathy, and school belonging. So social support is one of the most important protective factors, as having positive relationship with friends and family can increase resilience and help individuals cope with stress. Parental monitoring is also key, as parents can provide guidance, set boundaries, and intervene early if they suspect their child is experiencing or perpetrating using teen dating violence. Empathy is another important protective factor, as developing the ability to understand and respect the feelings of others can help prevent violent behavior. And then finally, school belonging, which refers to feeling connected and engaged with one's school community, has been shown to reduce the likelihood of using teen dating violence. So by promoting and supporting these protective factors, we can help prevent teen dating violence and create safer and healthier communities overall. Okay, so I know that was a lot of talking and I don't want to just talk at you, right? So let's take a little bit time to liven up and have more engagement during this presentation. And so we're going to use this program called Poll Everywhere. If you're not familiar with it, it's basically you submit your answers to the responses, and you can join either by web or join by text in the different directions here on the screen. So if you're using your computer, you'll go to pollev.com and you enter zbalin223, and then you can respond to the activity there. But if you're on your phone, you can text zbalin223 to the phone number, which is 22333. I know it's a lot of threes, but that's how it is. So the first activity that we're going to do with Poll Everywhere is a brainstorming exercise to get you thinking a little bit more deeply about experiencing and using teen dating violence. So the question here is on the screen, and then you're going to enter your responses there. And so the first question is, what are behaviors or changes that might make you concerned that a young person is experiencing teen dating violence? And like I said, the direction / where to text or where to go online are at the top of the screen. So you can go ahead and start putting in your responses, and we'll go from there. Okay, social withdrawal, grades. Withdrawal is coming in strong. Isolation, family and friends, distant, okay. Your reactions, I'll give it a little bit more time for a few more people to, okay. Okay, so the poll is full and no longer accepting responses. Depression, anxiety, bruises, changes in appetite. Okay, I see there's a change in sleeping on the middle of the screen. Okay. Okay, I like this one. Wearing clothes that doesn't match the season, changing the way they dress. So if we go to the next slide. So yes, I saw a lot of good answers on there. I know withdrawal and isolation was coming in strong. So we also have some responses that we have compiled or taken from the Dating Matters Toolkit. While this is not an exhaustive list, some possible warning signs that a young person may be experiencing teen dating violence can include problems at school, like a noticeable drop in grades or a noticeable weight change or changes in behavior. Maybe the teen has become unusually passive or quiet, or maybe you notice that they're isolated from their social group, which a lot of people did clock. Other possible signs could be regular bruising or injuries or alcohol or drug use. And last, a possible warning sign would be if it looks like they're being controlled by their partner. So for example, if you see them being firmly held or you notice that their time is monopolized by the person they're with, that could also be a possible warning sign. So that was really great. And then we're just going to do it again with one other question, which is the reverse, because we just talked about warning signs if the teen is experiencing teen dating violence. So now we're going to talk about what you might think would be behaviors or changes that might make you concerned that a young person is actually abusing their partner. Okay. Let's see, hovering, constant checking, not speaking, Constant apologizing. Okay, poor emotion regulation to situations and yelling at them. Bad mouthing. Ooh, speaking up for them. Okay. Ooh, verbalizing reasons their partner deserves consequences and trying to control what they do and what they wear. Bullying behavior, defensive. Wow, we've got a lot of good, well, not happy, but realistic responses. Gaslighting. Finishing their sentences and controlling their quote. Okay, so, ooh, social media, how relevant to the presentation? So, yeah, I mean, these are a lot of great answers also coming in, and then I can also show you what we have here on our list as possible warning signs. So the responses that you all gave, there's a lot of overlap with what we have too, but possible warning signs that a young person may be using teen dating violence can include they insist on walking their dating partner to class, they threaten to hurt others, they threaten to hurt themselves if the dating partner breaks up with them. They insult the dating partner in public or private. You know, somebody said bad mouthing, or they damage or destroy the dating partner's personal belongings, and they attempt to control what a dating partner wears, which a lot of people also caught on to as well. So there's many other possible signs that can be out there. Once again, this is not an exhaustive list, but just remember that when these behaviors are displayed, once again, the focus is about either power and control or control seeking. And so, yeah, that concludes the first portion of this presentation, as well as the first Poll Everywhere activity. And so just to summarize how far we've come so far, teen dating violence is a common experience among US teens, with female and sexual minorities experiencing higher rates of teen dating violence than their male and heterosexual counterparts, respectively. Teens can have negative and long-lasting, teen dating violence can have negative and long-lasting impacts on many areas in the teen's life, including their physical and mental health, their social life and relationships, and their education and career. Social support, parental monitoring, having empathy, and school belonging can decrease a teen's risk of experiencing or using teen dating violence. And knowing the warning signs for teen dating violence can help you identify teens that may need help or support. And I will pass the baton over to my colleague, Sydney.
Thank you, Abigail, and thank you for all of that introductory information. Now we're going to narrow our focus to teen dating violence or dating abuse in the context of the digital or online world, because we know that's such a big part of young people's lives today and can look really different from when a lot of us were that age. So we are going to kick things off with a second activity. So whatever browser tab that you had open previously that you were sending in, all those really good responses to Abigail's questions should still work. The same tech thread should still work. And this is kind of a lighthearted question. So what I want you guys to do is think back to when you were a teen. Like, what did dating look like for you? How did you, define dating? You could also share what words you used for dating, anything about norms, especially anything you think might not be the case anymore. Walking around the mall with no money, talking on the phone for many hours at night. These feel very familiar. Talking on the phone all night, puppy love. Going out was what you call dating. Yep. Holding hands in the hall, like at school. You asked someone out, it could have been over text, but that was rare, right? Texting was like a lot less a part of people's lives. Meeting at the locker to flirt, We said going out, and I remember adults not understanding and always asking, where were we going? Going to the movies, texting, calling each other all day, always wanting to be around each other. I think that part's consistent. Having my people talk to their people. There's a lot of like group dates. No social media. Walking together, hanging out together, going out, going to house parties, practicing what my name would look like with his last name, little like doodling in the notebook, driving by their house or house where people were gathered, hung out, going to high school sports games, maybe because someone was playing, writing letters to each other. All right, these are really awesome contributions. Thank you. Being seen together as an expression. Waiting for free minutes and nights and weekends because we didn't have unlimited minutes and like roaming and things, right? Yes. All right. Thank you all so much. So, there we go. So I think there's a lot more phone calls, right? I love all this talk about going to the mall. That was like a lot of my teenage dating experience as well. Not much of it was like on the internet. None of it was on social media. So some of those things have shifted, right? I remember when I was like in middle school, high school, like flirting was like on AOL Instant Messenger or in person. Like that was about it. We really didn't have smartphones. And, you know, the internet existed, right? At least when I was a teenager, but it was like this small corner of our lives, right? It's like you logged onto your desktop and logged off again. And that was kind of where the internet lived. You had the little dial-up modem. However, the internet is a rapidly changing environment, and we are all spending much more of our time there than we were 20, 30 years ago. And that's especially true for young people. According to a recent study by Pew, 46% of the adolescents report being online almost constantly, and another 48% report being online several times a day. So that's already 90% when we combine those. This is something that increased a lot over the course of the pandemic. When Pew conducted that same survey in 2015, only 24% of teens described themselves as being online constantly. So that was over a 20 percentage point increase, and we may even see more as time goes on. Today, about 95% of teens are estimated to have their own smartphone. So a large portion of the time that young people spend online is on social media. And of course, these are spaces for digitally interacting with other people and for conducting parts of relationships. So they're a space where dating abuse can occur. They're also a space where teens are constantly receiving messages and being influenced about social norms and expectations and behaviors. And this includes messaging about the acceptance of dating violence behaviors and beliefs about gender inequality. So, a large part of the social environment of teens' romantic relationships these days is online. And that means it's literally more visible than it was in the past. And this shows up in a lot of different ways. So there is the ability to read and analyze online interactions of romantic partners on social media. Teens can see friend lists and public interactions on profile pages or posts, including seeing who is liking a partner's post, what they're liking, who is commenting, who they're commenting on, who they're following, who's following them, right? These are like kind of really normalized capabilities of social media, but these are also surveillance capabilities when we're thinking in the context of abuse. Young people's self-esteem can be really affected by social media portrayals and the interactions they're having on social media, right? It allows for, we all know this, it allows for constant comparisons, not only of themselves, but also of their relationships and sort of kind of forming some of these idealized notions of couple goals. In this type of environment, visual depictions of relationships have a huge level of importance, right? Images are used to display changes in relationship status and to kind of put out what someone's relationship is like. And this ties back into these feelings of self-esteem and feeds into things like popularity, comparisons, jealousy. Within relationships, teens can experience pressure from partners to share social media account passwords. as tokens of love and faithfulness, but that also sets the stage for digital monitoring and is a behavior that's rooted in control. In addition to this, social media is where teens can see their ex-romantic partners, or is one place where. With ex-partners, studies have shown that you will use social media to search for exes online, right? And that when they do, that's linked to higher stress and longing. And additionally, posts around a breakup or about an ex can become forms of public harassment or bullying. So the most common way teens are interacting with romantic partners digitally is still through text messaging, but at least 1/5, so what's that, 20%-ish, are interacting with romantic partners on social media daily. And that is a stat from 2015. So knowing what we know about increases in internet and social media usage in the time since then, it's very likely significantly higher now. So now that we have a little bit of context on teens' digital world, let's talk a little bit about what constitutes digital dating abuse, right? So this is the control, harassment, and stalking of one's dating partner via technology and social media. Some other terms or ways it's referred to include cyber dating abuse, digital intimate partner violence or abuse, and electronic dating violence, broadly referring to the same idea. So how prevalent is this? And I'm sorry, I don't know why there's a blue line showing up on my screen. One study reported that 1 in 4 people between the ages of 12 and 17 who had been in a dating relationship had experienced digital dating abuse. In this study, this was defined as any form of physical, sexual, or psychological or emotional violence that occurred between romantic partners through the use of texting, social media, or related online mediums. So 1 in 4, it's actually 25%. So this is a really prevalent phenomenon to some extent. It's touching a lot of people's lives. So why is this happening so much? In addition to the prevalence of dating abuse generally, the internet is also just one more place, right, that it's possible for a partner to exert these behaviors of power control, right? It's another realm of people's lives. However, one theory about why we may see particularly a lot happening online is the online disinhibition effect. So what this means is that people might say or do things that they wouldn't tend to say or do in person because of like a perceived distance from those that they're affecting, right? We're behind our screens. This may result in violent or abusive communication behavior and lead people to be excessively mean and hurtful online compared to in person. This is kind of a lot of the rationale of why we see things like cyberbullying or like trolling on the internet, and it may come into play here. But this is not just an online phenomenon, right? Research has established significant correlations between in-person abuse and digital abuse, and at least one longitudinal study has found that perpetration of digital abuse predicts later perpetration of in-person abuse. So there are multiple frameworks for kind of thinking about all the pieces that constitute digital dating abuse and sort of classifying. And one of them is what we've got on the screen here. So we can think about this sort of, if we think about digital dating abuse as kind of the umbrella, one of the ways we can set up the components is to think about harassment, control, monitoring, and sexual coercion. That's how we're going to talk about it for a part of this presentation. One important thing to keep in mind here is everything Abigail said earlier about the dynamics of dating violence, right? Because they're all going to continue to apply here. We're thinking about patterns of behavior, we're using a power and control lens, and we're kind of aware of this idea of escalation over time. We're just shifting an environment. So the first one we're going to talk about is digital harassment, which is a form of emotional and psychological dating abuse that can include checking up on a romantic partner with excessive calls or texts or messaging, getting angry or upset with a partner if they're not responding to those texts and calls and social media messages, Can involve spreading rumors and insulting or humiliating a partner online, and could also include sending or leaving threatening messages by voicemail, text, and doing things like threatening to harm the self, partner, or their property, right? To sort of illustrate this a little bit better, here is a quote that comes from a study where young people who had experienced digital dating abuse talked about those experiences. And here an interviewee describes their experience of digital harassment in their past relationship and said, he sent texts all the time. In the beginning, that was exciting. We were so in love, but then he started to get very angry. If I fell asleep without saying goodnight, when I woke up, I would have 20 unanswered phone calls. And he would get these fits of rage if I didn't answer the phone. It would be a lot of voicemails about him coming to get me and stuff like that. So here we can see how this youth was expected to maintain, right, constant communication with their partner, and to respond immediately or face threats of harm. We can also see how this started out as something that seemed romantic, right? There was kind of a normalizing of this like constant communication behavior, and that seemed like a good thing initially, and it took a little bit of time for sort of the harassing and controlling and threatening side of that to emerge. All right, the second form of digital abuse under this framework is digital control, which is about enacting power over what a partner is doing or where they are or who they're interacting with online. So this can be very closely intertwined, of course, with digital harassment and monitoring. This idea specifically could include, controlling the whereabouts of a partner by asking what the partner is doing and with whom, especially based on images and videos posted online without the partner present, controlling and asking questions about posts and friends lists of partners' online profiles, and asking or forcing a partner to remove friends, posts, photos, and other things, other content on social media. So here, another participant from that same study describes their experience saying, I had to stop hanging out with male friends. I would block all boys on Instagram and such things. Those were things I had to do that I didn't like. I was allowed to be friends with boys on Facebook, those who he knew who they were, but I was not allowed to talk to them. So in this example, the partner exerted digital control by pressuring their partner into blocking or deleting contacts from social media sites. And in other cases, partners may be pressured to delete comments or posts that they've published before they started dating their partner, or a partner may even go into their account and do that for them. All right, so the next one we're going to talk about is digital monitoring. And this is using technology to track a person in their in-person or online whereabouts, which could include, demanding to know passwords and PIN codes, reading and checking a partner's phone and messages without their permission, checking in on where a partner is and what they're doing, tracking the location of a partner's phone, monitoring posts and who they're friends with and things like that. So another young person describes their experience here of their feeling monitored in their relationship, saying, if I put my phone in flight mode because I'm busy, he'll say, no, you didn't, it was turned off. And he'll send a lot of text messages, either from a known number or a hidden number. And if I answer the phone, he will hang up immediately because then he knows I've seen his texts. And then I was afraid that someone had tagged me in a photo so that he would see I was here. So this young person is clear that their partner is monitoring them because their assumption is that this barrage of phone calls and text messages has been triggered by their partner seeing them in a social media post. The last form of digital abuse that we want to highlight is sexual coercion, which often involves sexual pressure or sexual humiliation and can include pressuring a partner into sending sexually explicit pictures or videos, taking and sharing sexually explicit pictures or videos of a partner without their permission, and forcing a partner to engage in sexual acts via the internet or phone. Sexual coercion is very serious, of course, and potentially has legal consequences to it, particularly if the victim is a minor. This is a quote from a younger teen who described her former boyfriend pressuring her into having sex. He also took a nude picture of her and tried to pressure her to take even more revealing pictures. After they broke up, the ex-partner shared her pictures with a friend of his who put them online. This highlights both how abuse can continue after a relationship ends, and also how permanent digital images and content can be, and how hard it is for people to retain any control over them. So talking about digital dating abuse can kind of create the idea that abuse is happening in a space that is separate from the rest of a person's life, or that, you know, is free from non-digital consequences. And of course, that's not true. Digital dating abuse does not just stay in the digital world. It takes place alongside in-person victimization, including sexual, psychological, and physical forms of dating violence. In fact, in one study, 81% of students in about a 600-person sample who had experienced digital dating abuse, had also experienced in-person dating abuse. And at least one longitudinal study found that perpetrating digital dating abuse was a predictor for later in-person dating abuse. So there are still some gaps in the research when it comes to digital dating abuse, and one of those is measuring the long-term impact and consequences of young people who experience it. What we know so far is that young people who are victims of digital dating abuse are more likely to have the set of mental health and behavioral characteristics that are listed on the screen here. However, because of the type of studies that have been done to date, we don't really know well if or which of these characteristics were sort of risk factors for victimization versus if they were consequences of the abuse. But I'm sure we will learn into the future. All right, so okay, quick sip of water. So Abigail and I have laid a lot of information on y'all today. Some of it may be repeated, but hopefully at least some of it was new. And I think getting a lot of information about a really hard topic like this can create a bit of a feeling of powerlessness, right, in relation to all the things that young people that we're working with can potentially be experiencing. So for the third and final section of this webinar, we want to focus on some things that you can potentially do to help. So we're going to talk both about prevention and about intervention. And so we've entitled this section Empowerment, Agency, and Consent, because those are sort of the through lines or assets and protective factors that we want to be cultivating in young people. So in your SRAE programming, you have the opportunity to include healthy relationship programming. And that is really exciting because it's a way to help youth build skills and understanding that can help prevent dating violence, victimization, or perpetration. There are a lot of resources available about this. And I just wanted to point out here some of the elements of high quality healthy relationship programming, right? So that would include things like, examining characteristics of healthy and unhealthy romantic and sexual relationships, defining sexual consent and discussing its implications, exploring gender norms and stereotypes, building communication and conflict resolution skills, right? What does healthy conflict resolution look like? Teaching strategies for safe intervention or help seeking, providing resources on relationship abuse and sexual assault, and training staff to understand teen dating violence, be able to responsibly handle disclosures, and foster a positive school climate. Just like there are a lot of adolescent pregnancy prevention curricula out there, there are a lot of healthy relationship programming resources as well. And we'll link to a few at the end of this presentation. So whether or not it's feasible for you to implement something formal right now, every time you're with a group, you have the opportunity to model and communicate about healthy relationships and boundaries. when dating violence comes up because something happened in the media, it matters that you communicate clearly that abuse isn't okay and that you take it very seriously. Addressing it can help teens understand what dating violence looks like and know that it's not uncommon. That's helping young people develop their sense of what they will and won't be okay with in a relationship. And it's also communicating that you would take them seriously if they were ever to approach you about an issue like this. So we don't have a ton of time left, but in the remaining time that we do have, we're going to try and touch a little bit on a few of these elements today. So, as I talked about at the very beginning of this section, two of the assets that are important to be cultivating in youth in relation to dating abuse are a sense of kind of agency and empowerment, right? So instilling in youth a sense of control over what happens to them in a relationship, that they don't just have to accept what someone else kind of wants and does, and that they have power to make decisions and change situations. So here we have UNICEF defining agency as the personal capability to act and make free and informed choices to pursue a specific goal. There's a little bit more of a drawn out kind of academic definition underneath that from Berthelfi. And an important idea here is this last bullet, that an individual's sense of agency or the extent to which they feel empowered depends on context. And particularly in romantic relationships, the societal messaging that we absorb around gender norms, for example, can serve to diminish that sense of agency. It also means that, the youth that we perceive as being maybe more self-assured or confident or having more self-efficacy in the classroom may not feel that way when it comes to relationships. So these are great, really protective things to be thinking about in general for helping youth build their sense of their ability to influence situations and trust their own decisions and judgment. Another big picture idea, sort of underpinning idea that's really important here is consent. And I think it's really important to talk about this with youth because it's not something that is modeled a lot in sort of media or in a lot of our popular notions of relationships. But it's a really key part of making sure youth understand that they're entitled to boundaries and to bodily autonomy. And that the same goes for everyone that they are in relationship with, right? Consent is really a core part of healthy relationships. And it's an important expectation for young people to be carrying. So to start with, a really, really basic kind of bare bones definition of consent is this first bullet here from Rain, which says consent is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. However, there are contextual factors that complicate that idea, right? Because there are conditions under which individuals can't meaningfully give consent. So that includes being underage, being intoxicated or incapacitated, and also being asleep or unconscious. So for consent to be meaningful, which is what we care about interpersonally, someone has to have their faculties engaged to give it, and they have to understand what it is they're consenting to. From a legal perspective, what constitutes whether or not someone is considered underage varies according to, states' age of consent laws, as well as close in age or Romeo and Juliet laws. But from an interpersonal perspective, we can think about, whether someone is old enough and kind of developed enough to fully understand a sexual activity and its implications and consequences, and whether their age or their age relative to their partner compromises the power they have to say no or to disagree with something, right? So this is about power dynamics as well. Power dynamics matter a lot. And there can't really be meaningful consent in the context of intimidation. So it can't be freely given, when there are threats happening or things like that. Another important part of consent is that it's dynamic, right? So people always have the right to choose differently in the present moment than they did a week ago, yesterday, 10 minutes ago. And just because an individual participated in a certain activity previously does not mean they inherently give consent to participating in it again. Similarly, an individual could start engaging in an activity and something shifts, right? The vibe changes, they feel less comfortable, they just don't want to anymore. And they withdraw consent, and they always have that right. And I think that's a really important message for youth to hear, because there can be a lot of pressure out there with ideas like, oh, you did this before, like, what do you mean you're not doing it again? Or you started this, right? You owe it to me to continue this. And that's not right. I think the biggest underpinning here is this idea that your body is your own, and nothing happens to it without you agreeing and wanting that to happen, right? And the corollary to that is that everyone else's body belongs to them, and none of us are entitled to anything in relation to anyone else's body. I think another powerful thing for youth to know is that bodies don't consent alone, right? So no matter what physiological responses a body is showing, it doesn't matter. A person's body can respond to sexual stimuli with physiological signs of arousal or orgasm, and that doesn't mean a person in their mind is consenting to an activity or wanting it. Okay. So the idea of consent, right, is not that hard in and of itself. It's about honoring our bodily autonomy and respecting the bodily autonomy of others. What's hard is that we don't see it modeled a lot. And it's not really featured in sort of the social scripts that we're familiar with, that we have around kind of relationships and sexual activity. And so talking about it can feel really awkward. It might even feel awkward right now. The thing is that centering consent, though, does mean talking about it, right? It's not something that we can assume. It's not, oh, this person hasn't said no to something, so like that means yes. It means paying attention both to ourselves internally and what we want and feel comfortable with, and it's paying attention to our partners and what they're saying and how they're saying it and their body language and their emotional state. It means taking the time to check in with a partner and how they're feeling and doing, even though it feels awkward. On the slide are some questions that sex educator Nadine Thornhill recommends as starting places for conversations about consent with adolescents. So things like, what do you think consent means, right? Why do you think so many people place a great deal of importance on consent? Or, you know, what do you think about it? As well as some like kind of core messages that I think echo a lot of what I've said here. As starting places for responses, right? This idea that other people's bodies don't belong to us, that people are entitled to safety in their experiences, and that touching someone sexually without their consent is also a crime. She has a much longer video on this topic that is linked in our bibliography. So we've talked a lot about these key concepts of like agency, empowerment, consent. And so now we're going to move into talking about healthy, unhealthy, and abusive relationship characteristics. So Abigail earlier in the presentation, right, went over a lot of these ideas kind of in the power and control wheel. And this is a different way to visualize them. So this is a relationship spectrum on the screen here, and it was created by the group Love is Respect, and they put out a lot of great resources related to teen dating violence. And what I like about this visual in particular is that it shifts us out of more binary thinking, right, where behaviors are like good or bad, black and white. It allows us to think in a way that's maybe a little bit more reflective of real life, where things are a mix. And there are plenty of gray areas. So let's walk through the parts of the spectrum here. Under the green section, so healthy relationships and healthy behaviors, it talks about open and flowing and kind of continuous communication, respect for partners and their boundaries, trust and honesty, and shared power and decision-making, and also valuing time apart, right? Like not being with your partner all the time. And in the middle, there's sort of this, well, gray area, yellow area of things that are maybe not great. They're maybe not like super characteristics that we want to see in people's relationships. They're unhealthy, but they're not necessarily abusive, right? So things like communication consists more of fighting or not talking about things. There's sort of a lack of consideration of the other person's desires and their boundaries. There could be invasions of privacy, dishonesty. Maybe one person's wants are like almost always more important than the others. And there's sort of this narrow socialization that's really limited to the partner. But in and of themselves, these things aren't necessarily abusive. When we move all the way to the right, to this kind of orange toned part of the spectrum, we're going to see much more of what we saw on that power and control wheel. So things that like hurtful, threatening, or demeaning communication, disrespect for the thoughts, feelings, or even physical safety of a partner, physical violence, blaming the other person for the violence, making excuses for it, minimizing it, controlling and isolating a partner, and pressuring or forcing a partner to do things using blackmail or threats. So this chart, this chart is designed, for youth and kind of is written in that way. And one example of an activity that you can actually do with youth using this one is to sort of place different examples of relationship behaviors along the spectrum. So I don't have like an actual interactive spectrum that we're able to set up to do virtually today, but we are going to do an example of an activity like that using a Zoom poll again. So I wish we could drag and drop, but we're going to stick with a little multiple choice setup. I think I have items on this screen as well. So I think we're going to see 5 questions come up at once. And for each of them, you're going to have 3 response options, right, based on the spectrum that we saw above. So we're going to indicate whether you think each one is healthy, unhealthy, or abusive, and then we will run through them. So you want to take a minute to answer those 5 questions. So the first one is going to say your partner uses a name or pronoun that you don't like, but stops using it once you correct them or ask them not to. The second one is going to say when you go to your favorite restaurant and order something different, your partner acts disgusted and calls you stupid for ordering it. The third one says your partner appreciates your passions and encourages you to do the things that you love. The fourth one says your partner randomly stops by your job, even though you told them it made you uncomfortable. Fifth one says if you have a disagreement, your partner uses a silent treatment and won't talk to you for days. And then the sixth one says after an argument, your partner blocks the doorway and takes your keys to prevent you from leaving. All right, so let's see what answers we came up with. All right, the first one has a little bit of disagreement. We have 71% of people indicating that this is a healthy behavior and 27% of y'all calling it unhealthy. We have talked about this. I can totally see arguments for either of those. I think, we would tend to call this healthy because of the fact that there's a change in behavior, right? When someone learns that that's not okay, right? You correct them or ask them not to, and they stop doing it, right? We don't always get everything right the first time, but the important thing is that we're responsive when our partner expresses to us like, hey, that's not okay. I don't want you to call me that. Please don't. And that's responded to. All right. The second question here is even more of a split. So on this, the restaurant item, you go to your favorite restaurant and order something different and your partner acts disgusted and calls you stupid for ordering it. And we have 39% of people saying unhealthy and 61% of people saying abusive. And I can absolutely understand why we have that split. I think, what did we say here? We put this more towards the abusive end of the spectrum, right? That really demeaning, hurtful language is intended to sort of put someone down and have more control over them, right? Suggest that their decisions are wrong compared to yours. That's a pretty controlling thing to do. I think the important thing to notice here that may depend on the rest of the context of the relationship, right? So depending on how the other behaviors are, what the other dynamics are that are going on, you might lean towards putting that kind of further towards that right-hand end or further towards the yellow area, but it's really not something that we want to see happening in relationships. All right, the third one was straightforward. We had 98% of people saying healthy. And I fully agree with that, right? Your partner appreciates your passions and encourages you to do the things that you love, right? Regardless of whether they love them. That's wonderful. And we want that for all people. The fourth one, we have another split. We have 71% of people saying unhealthy and 29% of people saying abusive. And this was your partner randomly stops by your job, even though you told them it made you uncomfortable. I would lean towards placing this in the abusive column, although again, this may be a little bit context dependent. I think the really important factor here is that you've said that it makes you uncomfortable, right? So you've expressed a boundary and that's being violated, and it's being violated in a way that makes you uncomfortable, which suggests some level of kind of intimidation. So that's where my thinking would go on that one. The fifth one says, if you have a disagreement, your partner uses a silent treatment and won't talk to you for days. There's a similar split here. We have 76% unhealthy and 24% abusive. I think I would lean towards the unhealthy column for this, right? Silent treatment, particularly over really extended periods like that, is not good conflict resolution. It's not good communication skills, not what we want to see in relationships. I think by itself, it's not necessarily an abusive behavior, right? It depends if there's other sorts of control behaviors or violence or manipulation going on. But I think without knowing more, I probably wouldn't put it in the orange column, but would definitely not want to see it. The last one is, after an argument, your partner blocks the doorway and takes your keys to prevent you leaving. And 90% of people agreed that this was an abusive behavior. And I definitely am on the same page with that. I think anytime, right, that's a physical control behavior. If you're stopping where someone's going, that's a very threatening, intimidating behavior. You're taking away their keys and blocking the doorway. That's really interfering with their physical, bodily autonomy, and that's a scary situation to be in. So I hope that it was helpful to think through some of these examples. Right, the next little bit we're going to talk about is some ideas of sort of principles or guidance that you might want to consider if you are wanting to talk to someone that you are a little bit worried about, that they're experiencing some kind of dating abuse, in your life, in your program, any of the young people that you are connected with. So I think the first thing, pretty straightforward to consider, is to know that sharing your concern about a youth's safety and well-being is a good thing, right? Starting a conversation about this is another thing that can feel hard or feel awkward, but it's important. The young person that you want to talk to might not be ready to talk to you about it, right? But by raising your concern, you're communicating that you see something, that you care, and that you're somebody that they can approach about it if and when they want to. The goal of talking to someone is not necessarily for them to disclose more information to you, but to know that you are there to support them. In terms of tone, if you're talking to someone, You want to think about being supportive and understanding, never accusatory or judgmental. The last thing you want is to create a sense of shame, which can isolate someone further. Your role is to create a space that feels safe as comfortable as possible, and not one where they feel like they have to defend themselves or their relationship or their partner. So one way to do that is to make an observation of something that's happened, that's concerned you, and to focus on behaviors and not focus on the person, right? This can look like, hey, you seemed upset and intimidated by the way your partner was talking to you at the end of last class, right? Do you want to chat about what's going on? As opposed to, I don't like the way that they always act angry at you. They don't seem like a nice person. Why are you dating them? Remembering that if a young person is in a relationship with someone, it's likely that they do see good qualities in that person and feel protective of them. And so when that person is criticized, it can also come across like they're being criticized, their choices or their judgment. And that's definitely something we want to avoid. So if a young person does confide in you, right, and you learn about abusive behavior, it's also so important that you believe what you're being told and that you take it seriously. Often people who use violence don't give off that impression to sort of the other people who are not experiencing that violence from them, right? It can look really different. And the person who's experiencing violence can feel like, or even be threatened, that no one's going to believe them, right? That in and of itself is a tactic of control. This feeling that no one's going to take their word for what's happening. So the last thing we want as a person who's being confided in is to minimize what's happening or suggest that they're misinterpreting it or make excuses for it, right? We want to acknowledge that it was probably really hard for them to share what they've disclosed, and to validate that and definitely not blame them. But another thing that we might want to do is to ask them specifically if they feel safe with their partner, or if they have any worries, even small worries about their safety. That's a good time to provide resources, right? Letting them know that places like Love is Respect are good places to turn, and also letting them know that experiences like this are not uncommon, and that there is a lot of guidance and information out there, including adolescent-focused hotlines and text lines. When it comes to talking about what to do next, the most important thing is that, the young person you're speaking with, that they get to decide and that you follow their lead to the greatest extent possible, right? Because their sense of agency, and rebuilding that sense of agency really matters here. And our job is to respect that and to support them in feeling empowered to do what they want to do, not what we want them to do. So that means staying curious, asking them how they feel, how they want you to support them, and what they want to do. And remembering always that the timeline for making decisions about a relationship is not up to us, right? A young person might not be ready to make any big changes, and we have to accept that, no matter how hard it is. It really matters that you talk to them, and it matters that you continue to be supportive, and not kind of hold that decision against them or give them any sense of that. The last thing I want to flag is something to do before you engage in any kind of conversation like this, which is to be really aware of reporting mandates, and be upfront about them. Reporting mandates vary quite a bit from state to state, so I'm not going to discuss any specifics of them here, but just that knowing the reporting mandates in your state and that apply to you, so that you can be clear with a young person about any disclosures that would trigger a mandated report, right? This is part of making sure that you don't violate their trust by ensuring that they're informed before they choose what to disclose with you. So we have one last Poll Everywhere activity. I think this is the final part of this session. And so if you had a browser tab open, or if you had a text thread, this should still be working for you, even though it's been a little minute since we used it. Okay, So this is another open-ended response format. And there's a statement across the top here describing the situation, right? A hypothetical situation a young person's feeling. And your job is to write like one element of a response, right? A few words that you might want to say if you heard something like that, right? Thinking about sort of some of the principles that we just went over. So if someone is saying, I feel like my partner wants to pressure me into doing things that I don't like or know if I'm ready for, what are some things that it might be good to say in response to that? And there's a lot of things, right, that we could say. So just some initial responses or ideas are great. How does that make you feel is the first one I'm seeing here. Does your partner know how you're feeling? These are great questions to be asking. Any other suggestions, any other elements that people would want to include? Never allow anyone to force you into something you don't want to do, right? That they have control and agency there. Thank you for telling me I'm here to support you. How do you feel about looking into resources together, right? Validating that that's hard. That's a valid feeling. Your body is your choice. Have you let your partner know that you're not ready? What you want and how you feel matters too. Share what you want. Do you feel that it's healthy for your relationship? I think these are really thoughtful and really validating and supportive responses. I'm really happy to see all of these. Do you feel like your partner is respecting you? That's a good thing to know. Thank you for sharing with me. How can I support you, right? Like, what do you want here? You're the one who gets to decide. This is great. I really love seeing these. We had a little more space, so we're able to put a few more words in here. And the example, the response that we came up with was, you know, that sounds like a challenging thing to be dealing with, and I'm glad you felt like you could raise it with me. You shouldn't have to do anything you don't want to do. What do you think might happen if you talk to your partner about feeling pressured? And so, like so many of your responses we're hitting on, right? There's a few things that we want to do here. So validating their experience, acknowledging and welcoming that they shared it, and then emphasizing on these ideas of consent and agency and sort of seeking more information so that they can guide us. All right, there's another example here. And it says, I really love my partner, but they keep demanding I skip work, and I'm worried I might be fired. What are some initial responses we might have if confronted with that? Have you expressed your worries to your partner? I'm seeing pop up here, right? Do they know that this is how you're feeling? Have you told your partner your concerns? That's the same idea. Have you let your partner know you're concerned about being fired? Oh, I would not like it if my partner made me do this, right? Putting yourself in their position. Do you feel that your decision not to leave work will harm you in any way, right? So getting at their feeling of safety. What do you mean by demand, right? So kind of being curious, trying to understand more about the situation. How do you feel about your partner demanding you skip work? Do you think that is respectful? Sometimes we love someone and can have conflicting feelings about their behavior, and that's hard. This is a really complete response. I'm impressed you could get in that many characters. Yeah, this is great. Really validating and acknowledging where they're at while also asking more questions about how they feel about the situation. Inform them your concerns and the sincereness of the matter, of how that's a huge not okay, right? I really appreciate the message putting through that you want the person that you're talking to understand that it's not okay that their partner's putting them in this position. And that worries you, right? That's also focusing on the behaviors rather than the person. I think all of these responses were, and I think that's a really great thing to be seeing as well. And I think it's super, super aligned with the example we came up with, right? That you have a right to space and responsibilities outside of your relationship. You get to have that autonomy, that independence. Your partner should be supportive of your independence. Your feelings about this are valid, because if this is a relationship with abusive, it's also likely that, right, their feelings are being kind of minimized and things like that. How have things gone previously when you've talked to your partner about this, right? So both seeking more information, but it's also a way of kind of understanding a little bit like what sort of safety implications there are, right? Like if someone's gotten really angry and behaved in threatening or intimidating ways when this has been received, when this has been raised before, right? That's information that you would want to understand. All right, we are on to the very last little question of the session, and it says, I am not sure why my partner wants my phone password, but I don't want to share it. So thinking a little bit more into this digital context, right? Some of these sort of ideas of like digital control and digital monitoring and password sharing. What are things that you would want a youth to know if this was their concern? What would you want them to hear? So I know it takes a little bit of time for the typing and things to come over on these, but the engagement today has really been wonderful. Okay, here's the first one. How do you think they will react if you tell them that would make you uncomfortable? Your phone is your property. That's crossing a boundary, right? It's really important, this idea of boundaries and that they're entitled to them. Sounds like you don't feel comfortable to share your password. Do you feel comfortable telling your partner that, right? I love that that's a question, not just like telling them what to do, but reminding them you don't have to do anything that you're not comfortable with. That's wonderful and super important. I think there are some that flew by a little bit here. Oh, it's going to find me. You don't have to share your password no matter the reason. I'm glad you shared this with me. Have you spoken with your partner about your boundaries? And if not, would you like support in coming up with a plan to let them know? That's a really great one, right? Like offering yourself as a resource to help think through how they could approach this. This is understandable because passwords are personal information. How will your partner react if you say no? That's a great combination of validation and information seeking. Reminding them you have a right to privacy. Absolutely. These are all wonderful responses. That's a valid concern. Do you feel like you have to do this to show that you trust your partner? Are there other ways you could show you trust your partner without jeopardizing your personal safety and privacy? Right. So understanding also what's motivating the behavior a little bit, digging more into what someone is thinking and feeling there. Wow. I didn't mean to scroll through all of those. Okay, this is the correct slide. And again, this is a really quick example that we came up with, and y'all were so aligned with what we said here, which is that passwords are private and it's important to have digital boundaries. It's important to have any boundaries in healthy relationships, and they're yours to build. What do you think might happen if you didn't give your partner your password? So I know we are going right up on time. So these are kind of a recap here of the key takeaways that we're hoping that you will take with you from this session. And I'm going to very quickly pass it back to Denise.
Yes, hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming. If you could just go to the next slide. Yep, I
Sorry,
just wanted to
sticking a
say
little.
for the next slide after that, sorry. We're out of time for questions, but I wanted to make sure everyone knows that we will have a bunch of resources in the slide deck that we will send out after the webinar. So you'll have access to the resources. Next slide, also the references. We have 3 pages of references that we'll share. And then we also, go back, and we'll also be giving you the presenter's contact information so that you can reach out afterward if you have any questions. You can also reach out to the SRAETTA email address, and we'll make sure your questions get answered. This was such an insightful webinar. Thank you so much to our presenters. And I just wanted to ask if I'm going to put a link in the chat and ask that you just go ahead and grab this link before you hop off, and spend a couple minutes later today. Please just give us some feedback on the webinar. We'd really appreciate it. There it is. It's in the chat right now. We'll make sure you have a chance to grab that link before we end the line. And thank you all so much for coming.